All right, so a few weeks ago, I actually did a video. It was a first impressions video of French Avenue's X Xandal. I had like a small little sample of that fragrance and just kind of gave my initial thoughts on that fragrance. It wasn't necessarily like a love at first sniff for me, but I have definitely grown to like the fragrance a lot. And so I did go ahead and actually pick up a full bottle of X Xandal. All right. Now, what we're going to be doing in this video today is just basically kind of going over my final thoughts on X Xandal, as well as comparing this fragrance to the original, which is from Lorenzo Pazzaglia. And this is Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Van Py Rhum. All right. So I have the sample of that fragrance here, and we're just going to be going over the two. All right. So just to get started here, I'm going to start off with the notes of both fragrances. So the notes for Van Py Rhum are in the top, you get bourbon vanilla, Madagascar vanilla, Tahitian vanilla, vanilla, rum, and tonka bean. In the mid, you get vanilla, caramel, patchouli, and white flowers. And then in the base, you get black vanilla husk, rum, Indonesian patchouli leaf, and oud. Now for X Xandal, it is fairly, I would say, similar to Van Py Rhum. So in the top notes of X Xandal, you get Madagascar vanilla, bourbon vanilla, and vanilla caviar. In the mid, you get vanilla, rum, chocolate truffle, patchouli, and jasmine. And then in the base, you get vanilla absolute, caramel, tonka bean, and oud. All right. So, how close do these two smell to each other? There are definitely some, similarities for sure, but I would say that these two fragrances, X Xandal and Van Py Rhum, are not like exactly the same for sure. And there's differences in my opinion kind of all throughout the two fragrances. So the most noticeable difference that I would say you would be able to tell is when you first spray on Van Py Rhum, the rum note in Van Py Rhum is so much more prominent and more realistic in Van Py Rhum than what it is in X Xandal. X Xandal definitely does still have like a rum sort of note or accord within the fragrance, but it's nowhere near as sort of prominent as what it is in Van Py Rhum. And like I said, it doesn't smell as sort of like realistic. Like Van Py Rhum, when you first spray that on and you smell that rum note in Van Py Rhum, it's one of the most sort of realistic rum notes I would say that I've smelled really in any fragrance. Like it definitely smells like you just kind of like spilled some rum on the table or something like that. It smells really good. I definitely wish that that's something that X Xandal would have recreated or leaned into a little bit more for sure. But at the end of the day, this is still a very solid fragrance for sure. But I do prefer that very sort of boozy opening that you get from the Van Py Rhum with that rum note. Now, as the two fragrances start to dry down, I feel like that's where they kind of start to go in a more kind of slightly different direction. So to me, X Xandal, I actually prefer the way the X Xandal smells as it starts to dry down. It definitely is, in my opinion, a little bit more sweeter than what Van Py Rhum is. Whereas Van Py Rhum, to me, Van Py Rhum almost kind of, in some ways, it starts to smell slightly sort of medicinal, at least on my skin anyway. That's the way that it kind of comes across. I believe it's, mainly from like the patchouli that's in the Van Py Rhum. The way that kind of comes across, it just smells a little bit more sort of medicinal. I guess you could technically say a little bit more slightly kind of earthy and more realistic. Whereas in X Xandal, it's a little bit more kind of like chocolatey and a little bit more sweeter. And I just think overall, X Xandal, in terms of like the texture of this fragrance, it seems to be a little bit more kind of thicker and denser than what Py Rhum is overall. Which, I mean, at least for this particular scent profile, I don't mind at all. I actually do prefer that from, the X Xandal. Overall, man, I just think that this fragrance, X Xandal, is, it's the better scent for me anyway. I definitely could say that I wouldn't go out and buy the Py Rhum, to be honest with you. I mean, outside of that initial opening, with the rum, which really that rum opening in Py Rhum, it only lasts for maybe like, I don't know, maybe 3 to 4 minutes or so. Like, it's very, very short lived. And then it, starts going into like the vanilla and the patchouli for the most part. Like I said, I definitely wish that, X Xandal had more of that, maybe even like a longer lasting rum note. I think that would really, really make this kind of like the perfect fragrance, at least in my opinion. But just overall, I mean, I feel like the X Xandal, for as close as what it comes in terms of quality, because I mean, this, just like the Royal Taboo, this doesn't have any sort of harshness to it. So when you spray it on, you're not met with any sort of alcohol blast or anything like that. Like, this does smell like a, niche sort of vanilla patchouli, slightly kind of boozy style fragrance. It smells a lot more expensive than what it goes for, I would say. And I mean, other than like just some overall sort of slight differences in smell between this and Py Rhum, I feel like the X Xandal is, in my opinion, the better buy for the most part. Because again, quality wise, it's not really any different from, Py Rhum. And I mean, obviously smell wise, you are sort of getting some differences. But I mean, for the most part, this smells on par with Py Rhum, just with kind of like some slight sort of differences, like I said. So yeah, man, overall, like I mentioned, I don't think I was necessarily ready for, as much patchouli as what I got in this fragrance when I initially sprayed it. I was definitely more so kind of, expecting more sort of like a more traditional, sweeter kind of vanilla type of scent. So when I got that, really, really large dose of patchouli in this scent, it wasn't something that I was necessarily ready for, but I definitely, again, over time, started to appreciate that note in this fragrance a lot more. This fragrance, man, is, like I said, I would definitely prefer this over Py Rhum. I don't know how much Py Rhum goes for. I haven't looked it up, but I would assume that, more than likely a bottle of that fragrance has to be probably more than $200, if I'm guessing. Definitely let me know in the comments if you all know for sure how much a bottle of Py Rhum costs. But whatever it costs, like I said, I'm sure it costs more than, what I paid for this. I don't think that the Py Rhum is worth it, to be honest. Now maybe for, kind of like those like fragrance kind of connoisseurs where, they don't believe in buying, inspired fragrances or anything like that, they would probably, smell this and then try to, say that this smells better than, what the X Xandal does. I mean, at least for me anyway, that's just not the case. I mean, like I said, I do prefer the slightly thicker, slightly sweeter, sort of take on this fragrance. I do wish that it had, you know, a little bit more of an emphasis on that boozy rum note in the opening. But what I also do like is the fact that, you know, again, the patchouli in this seems to be a little bit more sort of chocolatey and slightly sweeter than what it is in Py Rhum. Whereas in Py Rhum, like I said, it's a little bit more earthier, a little bit more sort of medicinal smelling. And then overall, to me, the overall texture of Py Rhum just seems to be a little bit more, I guess you could say slightly lighter than what it is in X Xandal. It's just not as dense, basically, is what X Xandal is. So, you know, because of that, this, while it does still perform very well, you know, longevity and projection wise, it's not going to be as much of a beast as what, you know, X Xandal is. So, if you are a fan of like really sort of, you know, vanilla prominent, you know, kind of slightly boozy, slightly almost kind of like a chocolatey sort of feel, you know, to the fragrance as well. If you're a fan of those types of fragrances, then I do think that, you know, you will be a fan of X Xandal. You know, whether or not you're a man or a woman, I think, you know, both could probably definitely pull this one off. I don't necessarily think that really matters, but to me, I don't know. I kind of feel like, at least for me anyway, this is, I would say maybe a more kind of male leaning sort of, you know, unisex style vanilla fragrance. So that's my opinion, at least. All right. Now, in terms of the performance on the X Xandal is extremely good. So as far as the projection goes, projection on this is going to be like well past the arm's length. I would say probably at least about, I don't know, 5 to 6 feet or so for like at least the first 3 to 4 hours, at least on my skin anyway. Like, this was really good performance wise. And then in terms of the longevity, this is going to be well over 12 hours. So this is a all day long, you know, type of fragrance. And it is definitely a fragrance that you'll probably want to be a little bit cognizant of how many times you spray it, because I could definitely see that. I could see how this could become, you know, a little cloying. So again, performance on this, really good. No complaints there. In terms of the, you know, sort of closeness to Py Rhum, this to me is like maybe 75%, you know, close to Py Rhum. So like I said, it's definitely, it's not like, it doesn't seem to be like an exact clone or anything like that. I don't know if that's deliberate or, you know, I'm not sure, but this is definitely not the exact same thing as Py Rhum. Again, it's not as boozy in the opening. It's definitely sweeter. It does have a denser sort of feel to it. The patchouli comes across differently in this fragrance. In my opinion, it's a little bit better, not as medicinal and earthy. So those are definitely the differences that I get there in terms of the closeness. And then in terms of my overall rating, to me, this is like a solid 8 to 8.5 out of 10 for the most part, man. This is a very solid vanilla fragrance. I would definitely say, you know, if you don't like this fragrance on first sniff, maybe give it a few more wearings. Cause like I said, at least for me, the first couple of times that I wore this fragrance, I was like I'm not really feeling this. You know, like I said, it was definitely a lot heavier on the patchouli than what I was expecting. So that's a lot of the reason why I wasn't really feeling this one at first, but definitely, you know, maybe after probably the third or fourth time of wearing the fragrance, that's when I really kind of started to like it a lot more. So definitely I would say give this one a chance. But really I would say only if you are someone who does like vanilla fragrances. So if you don't like vanilla fragrances, then I don't think that this should be a fragrance that you should be trying. I mean, maybe you might like it. This might be the one vanilla fragrance that you might actually like, but I do think that this is, for the most part, for people who do like vanilla. All right. So, like I said, 8 to 8.5 out of 10 for my overall rating on X Xandal. And that's my take on this fragrance, man. I feel like, for the most part, this isn't really, right now anyway, this isn't really the season for me to wear this fragrance. I would definitely say this is definitely more of sort of like a fall and winter time, sort of scent. So, I probably won't get much wear out of this fragrance until probably late October, early November, around that time. But again, this is a very, very solid fragrance, man. So again, man, check out X Xandal from French Avenue. Also, let me know in the comments if you all have smelled X Xandal, and if so, have you all also smelled Py Rhum from Lorenzo Pazzaglia, and how close do you think that these two actually come to each other? All right. So let me know in the comments below. Also, I have links in the description to where you can pick up X Xandal. And if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see y'all in the next video.